Welcome to Measurably Better Learning, the podcast built for learning and development professionals. Whether you're an instructional designer, L&D professional, or corporate leader, get ready for insights and ideas that will transform your approach to learning, training, and development. So let's dive in. Welcome to this edition of the Measurably Better Learning podcast. I'm joined today, as almost always, by my friend Miriam Taylor. Miriam and I have been working together for more than a decade, and I've had the opportunity to work on all sorts of interesting projects in small organizations, some big nonprofits, and mostly quite large and substantial multicultural, multilingual, multinational companies. And it's been fun. So today we're going to dive into a topic that you and I discuss often.
Yeah. Frequent.
Yeah. Cognition, right? How does cognitive science and our understanding of the functionality of the brain and how we think and what we can handle and what we can't, how does that inform instructional designers to create better learning experiences? And so it's an interesting topic. I read recently that the amount of data that somebody takes in a lifetime 500 years ago is the equivalent to the amount of data that they take in one day.
Yeah, I believe it.
500 years from, and 500 years ago, people lived to be, 40?
Right.
Right, so it's 40.
Hopefully.
But what they took in, the things they were exposed to, the data they took in 40, maybe 50 years, is equivalent to the amount of data that comes at us in a single day. I have no idea if that's right. I don't know how they figured that out.
It feels like it's right, at least. That's right.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I think most of us are, advanced enough in years to say we would totally agree with you.
Yeah, definitely.
Our childhoods were very different than our own kids, and so on. So, walk us through this, Miriam. What do you see? And one of the key factors here is prior knowledge activation. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think if we're applying principles of, understanding cognitive science and that sort of thing, one of the things that I think, I don't want to say it's a hill I'm going to die in, but it is actually probably a hill I'm going to die in. When I started very early in this business, we were doing, the instructional design was ILT, right? So we're making manuals and we're making workbooks. And then I was right on the cusp. I was teaching high school of all of this e-learning and designing e-learning classes. And a lot of it was for higher ed, but not all. And one of the things that I realized right away is that when you're in an instructor-led classroom situation, you are starting with, because it comes naturally, this is what we talked about last time. This is what we're going to talk about next. Here's how these two things connect, all of those sort of like connecting pieces.
You have a very structured learning environment that starts when you're 4 years old and goes until you decide you're done.
Right. And in that classroom as a trained teacher, you're always trained to help your students activate that prior knowledge. This is how what I'm teaching you now connects to yesterday. This is how what I'm teaching you now connects to the very next thing. And when we started jumping into e-learning, all of that just got forgotten. I remember looking, at courses where it's just like a series of things. Read this, do this, discuss this. I'm like, well, why? How do they connect? I don't know how this information was important compared to what do I know already. And especially with adult learning, adults come with tons of already like experiences and knowledge that they're bringing and gaps.
Right. Yeah. Because you have 10 people who are all taking the same e-learning module or whatever. There could be enormous gaps in what they know and what they don't know.
Right.
So how does that help us think through adult learning in terms of, let's say, in the corporate setting?
Right. So in the corporate setting, whether you're designing a simple e-learning module or micro-learning, or you really have to think immediately of what do my learners either already know or what do I need them to know before they jump in. So a key part of that is writing objectives, right? But that prior knowledge activation, that can come in the module. So it's written in the script. It's part of my objectives, or it can come ahead of time. Maybe there's a test out opportunity to demonstrate that I already know these things, or maybe it's pre-work some kind of pre-assignment I need to do before I jump into this module, just to reactivate, well, this is something we talked about 6 months ago. I'm going to reactivate that before I jump into the
And then you find, oh, it's actually there.
Right. Exactly. Or you find it's not, and in which case, if we do a good job, we can teach for that gap. We can provide resources or other things to cover that gap.
How about, I mean, I've heard you use these terms, chunking and scaffolding, which are my two favorite flavors of ice cream.
Right.
But what do you mean by chunking and scaffolding? What is that? How do those terms apply to adult?
Yeah. So chunking really is a ridiculous word. It makes me laugh, but it really refers to small chunks of learning. So, and truthfully, the learning industry has grasped onto that with micro learning, right? Which is really a really important concept.
First.
No.
I mean, my goodness, a 60-minute.
Oh.
You
just want to gouge your eyes out by the time you're done.
Sitting there and, every 7 minutes there's a knowledge check. Yeah. And pretty soon it's like, oh, goodness sakes.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's chunking. And then building on that is, you can segment so much into little chunks that your learner can't figure out how to put the pieces together. And so scaffolding really is a couple of things. One, it's building, right? You're building upon each other, but you're taking those small chunks and you're building it into something. And oftentimes it's letting your learner know where you're headed. So in their head, they have the schema. I know where I'm going. I know the big picture. And here's how these little chunks fit it.
Yeah. Interesting that being able to locate, to access prior information and locate where you are.
Yes.
And then say, okay, I know where I am and I understand where we're going. And now I have a very hard time learning facts that aren't.
I do too. My brain's always trying to put it together. Yeah.
When I had to study for school several languages, and languages like learning flip cards with a word on it and then flipping it over, right, in the old days, it's very hard to do for me. Mm-hmm. I don't know how this connects to anything else. So, good. All right, well, we'll take just a minute.
Take a break.
And we'll be right back, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into cognition and cognitive science.
Imagine a world where every training session, every learning module, and every translated document is aligned with your company's unique goals and global ambitions. Welcome to Ingenuity, where we don't just talk about elevating your corporate learning, we make it happen. At Ingenuity, we understand the heart of your business is its people. That's why we specialize in creating custom learning solutions and translation services that are not just effective, but are designed specifically for your business's global needs. Let us show you how learning cannot be just better, but measurably better, with solutions tailored just for you. Learn more in the description below. All right, well, welcome back. Jerry, we've been talking about cognitive science principles, cognition, and how they relate to instructional design. Truth be told, we could spend an hour and a half on a lot of different ones, but we kind of tried to draw out a couple key ones. So another one that's very interesting, I think, especially just with a lot of the advances in technology and things, is feedback, providing feedback to learners. And what role does that play? How does cognitive science influence that? And what role does that play in helping our learners retain their information?
Yeah. And everybody likes feedback. And we get, I'm watching feedback, right? It used to be that most people that work got paid monthly,
mm-hmm.
right? And then there was a transition to paid every 2 weeks and then weekly. There is a restaurant, a national chain
mm-hmm.
in our town, in my town, that pays you daily. Every single day. You work 8 hours, you get paid 8 hours. I can't imagine how complex it is, but I think it has something to do with the games that we play and the things that we do, where we're getting immediate, instant feedback.
Yeah.
And then to stick me in something where there's 20 minutes and you've given me no feedback of any kind.
Right.
I'm just a sponge, right? There's no interchange. There's no responsiveness to it at all. And especially for, people that are younger,
mm-hmm.
there are certain expectations that they have. So, how about cognitive load? It's a fascinating topic. I'm thinking of television, right?
Mm-hmm.
When television originally was basically watching a play. There were actors on a stage. It was a single camera. You were watching things occur. Then starting with movable cameras. but they were stationary.
Mhm.
I remember the first television show, I think it was Hill Street Blues or one of those where they were carrying cameras, and the cameras, the people weren't just moving, the cameras are moving, very disoriented.
Mhm.
Now I look at a news broadcast, and there are two people most of the time yelling at each other.
Right.
And there's a runner along the bottom,
Yeah, there is.
gains
Yeah.
information. It might be 2 lines deep,
Yep.
so that there's things
Mhm.
going this way. There's stuff on the right side, there's stuff on the left side of the screen. The amount of information that comes at us, as we talked about, is an overwhelming amount. How in the learning world, in the learning profession, should we be thinking about
Yeah, there's some very real scientific principles, brain science principles behind it. And I think that is where the learning and development world would differ from pure entertainment.
Right.
And I think sometimes we get too caught up in that because we need it to be engaging and we want our learners to listen and tell the story. And all those things are fantastic principles. But when you have, for instance, words appearing on the screen that are appearing after or before or aren't synced or are confusing to what you're hearing in the audio, or the images are appearing and the images don't really add anything to what you're trying to learn, there's that aspect of cognitive overload, right? Like how much can your brain process through different sensory features? And then what you alluded to, the other aspect of cognitive load is just sheer distraction.
Right.
We're designing, theoretically, we're designing learning, but that our learners can look at on a phone, a mobile device of any kind. But, like my Instagram feed or my TikTok, right? It's everything's, and I'm dating myself. There's like other stuff out there. I don't Snapchat, I have to talk to my kids. I don't know. But things, updates coming all the time. And so that's part of cognitive load too. We know that the moment you're distracted, now your brain, you're not making those neural pathways aren't connecting anymore. And that's a whole separate issue. That's a huge issue facing learning in general.
It is. And then you add in work from home.
Right. Agreed.
Right. It used to be you were in a fairly controlled environment. Now you're in work from home. That I just got a puppy.
I do.
Right. So try having a meeting with a 12-week-old puppy on your lap, right?
Yep.
Who's just a, little warm, fuzzy little guy. And like all of a sudden I hear my name. I'm like, oop, I wasn't really paying attention. That's got to be
I
happening.
might have been on a few of those calls.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
Sorry. Just know it's not you.
I know. He's very cute.
But looking at that and thinking, the doorbell rings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your home phone, if you still have on, rings. All the stuff popping up on your screen, all the things popping up on your phone.
Family responsibilities, all of that. Yeah. Yep.
So we have to make some judgment calls about, in learning, how much can you actually expect of a person's attention?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I think you probably won't like this statement, but do we have to think about dialing that?
I think you and I talked about this before. We've read about it, certainly. Like the brain's capability of attention is still there. It's really the world around us that's so much more distracting.
Yeah.
Your brain is still capable. Now, some of us have had to learn, I have personally, to like retrain your brain to focus for longer, but that's because of the distraction. So there's kind of this fallacy in the learning and development world that, people have sort of this attention span, this memory of a goldfish, and that's it. And that's actually not true. It's not true scientifically at all, but it does have a lot to do with distractions. And so there are things we have to think about in terms of minimizing the distractions, making things engaging, but not at the expense of creating a cognitive overload situation where there's so much going on the screen. I don't know where to focus and I don't know what's important.
Let's stop quickly on AI, because AI has the ability to gather and throw at us an enormous amount of content.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think in 500 years they're going to look back at us and say, well, wow, their brains only had this much capacity. Look at what our brains. I'm sure we'll have antenna, at that point.
I know.
Well,
I don't want to guess in 500, right?
But
yeah.
Do you think AI's and even social media's ability do you think that's going to increase or simply continue to challenge our ability to think things through?
Well, I think it will increase, but I think that that's also a call to us to be challenged. So, for example, one thing that AI can do very simply, ChatGPT very simply, is create some of those schemas for us. So we have all this overwhelming amount of information. I can put it in and I end up with an outline, or I have these thoughts in my head. I'm trying to design something or work with design some type of learning experience. I can put those in and ask it to reorganize. And that's a very simple illustration, but it does also have the capability to help create those mental models for us to help us focus on what's most important.
Yeah.
But it's also going to be overwhelming, I think.
Good. Thank you. I enjoyed our conversation as always.
Yeah.
And thank you to those of you who are listening and watching for your time today. We appreciate it.
Before we wrap up the show, if you're looking to dive deeper, we've got tons of free downloads, L&D resources, and details about upcoming webinars that you won't want to miss. They're found in the episode description. Plus, if you ever want to chat with either one of us, now's your chance. You can find links in the episode description to connect directly with Miriam or me. We're here to answer your questions and to discuss all things learning and development. And speaking of questions, we love hearing from you. Whether it's a question or a comment or a topic you're curious about, or if you just want to join the conversation, drop us a comment on your favorite social media channel. Your input shapes our shows. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. It's the best way to ensure you never miss out on our latest episode. We're excited to continue to transform learning into a measurable success with you. Until next time.